So here's the painting at this stage. We had a break, and during the break, I added in a few things. I added the colors of the sunflowers. They were too yellow before, so I added in a bit of orange with cadmium yellow, just plain cadmium yellow, and some cadmium orange. It still needs a little work in here. So then I decided I did not like the color that the vase was, so I added in a little purple to the blues, and I added in some darker colors. I think I put a little bit of purple and ultramarine blue with the cobalt blue and worked it over. So this is the lighter color is the part that's in the light, and that has a lot more white in it. And I added in the highlights just to give it a look of reality. So for the highlights, I really mixed a much lighter blue and put it in right here and then a touch right here. Then after I had that light blue, I added in just a dot of almost pure white. So having done all of that during the break, I now need to continue. I want to do the wine glass, and I'll use my reference. That's the most unfinished part of this. Also the pink cloth, which is what everything is sitting on. Then I'll move over to the fruit and work on the little green bowl a bit. If we still have time, I'll work on the background to unify it, and I'll also go into the middle of the sunflower and just make it just a bit darker. It's not a dark brown sunflower, as you can see, but it still, I think, needs to be just a bit darker. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, I put a dab here. It's a little darker than I want, so I'm going to just take a little bit more of this light color and mix in on the edge. So, starting down like this, like so. Trying to leave space for the highlights. There are a lot of highlights on this glass. And to retain the ellipse of the shape of the glass, that's very difficult for me. Maybe not for other artists, but it's difficult for me. And I've already put some dark over here. So I've got to also get to the ellipse of where the wine actually touches. So I put my finger on a dry part of the canvas just to steady my hand. And I have to keep looking back and forth to my reference photo. And I need a little more light color for these edges, because I think the paint is much lighter there. I mean, the scene is much lighter. So the paint is fairly thin. And if I'm pleased with what I get, I will leave it that way. But if I think that it needs a little bit more, I can always put in some paint over top of the paint that I've already done. So, kind of tough to get this actual ellipse. But I'm gonna keep going. Some things that you paint are easier than others. I think you'll find that. So when I paint the other side of the glass, I want to leave room for the highlights which create the shape of the glass. This paint will probably dry pretty quickly, because it's got colors, and I can't tell you why, but it's got colors in it that dry quickly. Some people call them that they close. Some people will say they close, or if they say that some paint stays open, it kind of means that it's going to stay sticky for a little bit longer. Trying to get the shape. Glass is difficult, but I felt so good the first time I ever mastered it. I guess you could say mastered it, because, well, it looked like it. I mean, it just felt really good. If you're painting from real life, painting glass, you need to sit in the same position. You need to look at it and memorize what it looks like. And if it doesn't work the first time, obviously, keep trying. You'll notice I keep going back and forth to my reference photo, and if this was painting it from life, I would be doing the same thing. I would be going back and forth looking at it and painting, and looking at it and painting. So the highlights on the edge are tough, as I said. But I do have a nice little eraser device that I showed you earlier. So if I need to fix anything, I think I can use that. I added a little bit of a yellow color because I see it yellow. I see more yellow in these highlights. So you might notice I'm using my smaller size filbert brush for this finer area. If I used it if I used a small brush for the whole thing, for the whole part of this glass, then it could get too many weird looking brush strokes. But the nice thing about oil painting, obviously, is that you can paint over it. Whereas with watercolor, I think it's a little harder. So I'm going to go back and forth with my larger brush with the blue on it, and I think I might have, maybe I should have come down a little further here. And it seems like this background cloth has too many folds in it, but I don't need to paint all those folds unless I want a super, super, super realistic look, which is not what I'm going for. Going into the little bit of a darker paint here to cover over where I had too much light, I thought. And I think it's important to stand back from your picture every so often so that you can take a look at the total or what you've done so far and make sure that it looks right. Now I'm going to clear my brush a little bit, wipe it with this. I can see what I see when I stand back. Well, I see a lot of things, but one of the main things is that the color with the wine is too green, it's too light. So I'm going to have to figure out how to change that color, and also need to, of course, finish doing the highlights. I think I'll do that next. Trying to do the highlights on the glass. at least to get them in there. I can always go back over with a little bit of more paint. And there's some highlights over here too that I missed before. So doing this splash is going to be a lot of back and forth, give and take, kind of playing around with it. So I have a lot of problems with ellipses, which is what you see when you look at something sideways, something that's round like a bowl or a glass. So what I try to do when I have some spare time, or even in between TV programs, is to draw. I just get my pencils out and sit there and draw ellipses. They aren't for anything but my own practice, for any purpose, I mean. So I'm actually painting wet into wet, and that's why I'm using these brushes, these Mimic Sable brushes. Mimic Sable are very soft. And by the way, I do have a few that are pure sable, and as a matter of fact, I'm going to grab one. But they almost work the same way. The Mimic Sable is just a little bit less expensive. It used to be that sable brushes were thought to be very, very expensive. I guess they were, but I just find that the Mimic Sable works just as well as the regular sable. But I am going to grab this little brush, which is kind of, everybody has their go-to brush, their primary brush that they use. So I'm going to, and I don't, maybe I like this. They make short-handled brushes, but this was a long-handled brush that broke. And I thought, well, I can't throw it away. The brush is still good. I'm finding I like this shorter handle, so maybe I should buy some more with the shorter handles. Again, it's all what you find that you prefer. The more you do try it, the more you'll get used to, or the more you'll figure out what you want to work with. Okay, now I'm going to try to work on the highlight on the outermost lip of the brush. I'm using, this time, because I'm actually going to be redrawing this part, I'm using my hog bristle brush. I want to try to get the shape of this stem of the wine glass. And then I will go back in and paint some more of the wine itself, but first I want to make sure I can get the shape better. I'm using the side of this brush to do this because it's sharp, got a sharper point. And there will be some highlights, but they will go in probably with the softer brush. So I'm going to trim it a little bit with using this darker paint, which is just about the background color. And it doesn't matter that I'm going into the pink. Just want to make sure I get the shape against the background. And I think it looks pretty good at this time, so I'm going to go ahead and blend where I blended in with the background. And I can also go over that later with a little bit of linseed oil. So I haven't mixed any of the pink background, but yet I'm going to remove that area with my little scraper as much as I can, but then the pink oil paint will help get it off, so you won't see it at the end. Okay, I'm still blending in this place where I trimmed the stem. So I'm just still blending it in with the background a little bit, but it will, as I said, have a bit of linseed oil. And I don't know that I want to do the base of the wine glass yet. I really want to get some darker color in here. And I need to continue to work on getting the highlights of the wine itself. Obviously, I will have to go over and get more highlights in the wine glass, but the highlights can always be done later. So I next need to mix, and I like to pre-mix as much as possible. I need to mix this color to be a little bit darker, but it's not going to be exactly the blue. So I'm going to start with green because it looks green. I've got sap green and a little touch of viridian, but mainly sap green. And then I'm going to grab some of this darker color that I mixed and a little bit of Naples yellow. So if you can see me mixing this, now it looks too green right now, so I need a little more blue. So I put a little ultramarine blue in, a little bit of the OMS, also called solvent. I think it's still too green, so a little bit more blue. And to see if it looks right, I'm going to hold it up. Nope, it's still a little too dark. I'm going to try some yellow ochre in with this color. Just a little bit for starters. And we could just say the yellow ochre almost represents the wine, which is a white wine, it's more yellowy. So I think I've got the right color. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's about what it should be. And I'm going to also need some yellowish highlights. I'm using some yellow ochre and Naples yellow. Let's see how that does. It's not so yellow yet, in my opinion, that I would need to use the cadmium yellow, but may end up doing that towards the end. I always work with a paper towel or rag in my hand. It helps to wipe off the brushes if there's too much paint on them. And I'm going to use the same brush that I mentioned, my favorite filbert, which is the sable brush that was broken. So starting with the dark color, just going to go right over what I painted before, which was painted very thinly. And I'm looking at my reference photo as I do this. But kind of following the lines of what was done before. Oh, I think that looks much better. I'm using the brush on the side, which is one way of holding a brush, but you can hold it different ways. I believe I heard in one of my art classes that John Singer Sargent used his brushes way to the back. That would have been a long brush. I've tried that, and sometimes it's good, and other times, no. So you just have to see what works for you. I guess I like this brush because it's very maneuverable. I'm not suggesting that you take your brushes and break them, but in this case, I don't think it hurt. I didn't break it deliberately, as I said, it was an accident, but maybe a happy accident. Now this inside is a little grayer, so I'm just going to add in a little of this gray from the side. Stand back and take a look. It needs the yellower highlights. So I got another filbert with a narrower point to try to do these side highlights of the wine itself. Some I feel like I could just leave alone so that I don't change the shape. But it's nice to blend in the wet and wet. And this side part is really kind of a neutral. It's not a bright yellow at all. So at least now, I want to mention that there are some artists who paint more loosely, and they just and come out with a nice looking painting. I admire that kind of painting. It's not what I do, partly because I need to learn it. But in the meantime, I like painting more realistically and more solidly. Okay, now I'm going to try to tackle this middle part of the stem. And that is really a lighter blue. So I'm going to come down through the middle. And it's reflecting the pink, but the reflection, you won't see, the reflection actually is a little higher. Okay, now I'll work on the stem. And it seems like there's a lot of gray in there. That blue has translated into gray. So I'll just mix a little bit more yellow into this, more of this highlight color, this light color, into what I've got, and then just maybe grab a little tiny bit of red, just a little bit, to make it a little more gray. Now it's almost too gray. Here. So this kind of curves right here. This is like a broken line over here, but I'm going to put the whole thing in, and then I'll make it look like the broken line I mentioned a little bit later. I just want to get the shape. I haven't defined the shape of that very well yet. So when you're drawing this, something like this, from life, you're going to want to measure everything against other things, in a good, true drawing style or fashion. And by the way, I would say, if you're really a beginner, take a drawing class before you actually start to paint. So I'm standing back to take a look at it, comparing it to the shape. I mean, it's on the sample photograph, it's definitely, the reference photograph, it's definitely not as dark as what I have, but at least I'm getting the shape. And it can be lightened. It's another ellipse, but it's a little bit easier because it's flatter. There, it's just an intricate play of different grays in this. So if I want to continue to play with this, I think I need to get started on the pink background.